And a very good Sunday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern Time, whatever time zone you happen to be in, whatever you happen to be doing right now. Welcome to the Sports Wagering Zone. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as podcasting on most of the major podcast platforms, such as iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on Apple Podcasts as well, and many more. Spotify, you name it. We could be here for a half hour talking just about the various podcast platforms that you can find the Sports Wagering Zone. So welcome to the show. Like I said, I'm Chris Pardo. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, ready to talk about some real baseball. Boy, the spring is in the air. You can just smell the grass. It's really starting to come together now. It kind of reminds me, I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, which by no means is a city that's full of trees and grass and things of that nature. But the one thing that I totally remember and I enjoyed growing up in that area during the era that I did grow up in, we had a local baseball team, which was a AAA team called the Jersey Giants. Right across the river, you had the New York Yankees. Back then, you had the New York Giants and also the Brooklyn Dodgers. So you had four different venues for watching baseball. That's why we were real big baseball fans back in that era as well. But I can always remember going to the stadium for the very first time, maybe not exactly opening day, but somewhere within the first week of the season opening up. We would go to the stadium and you could just smell that freshly cut grass. It still remains with me to this day. It's just amazing how certain things in your life seem to come back and relive themselves again. In other words, whether they're good or bad, there are some bad memories there as well, but most of them were very good growing up. I had a great time growing up in that city, and baseball was really the king all over the place. In fact, even back then, if you went to Yankee Stadium, as long as you got there after 4.5 innings, you could actually go in for free. Because after 4.5 innings, the game, of course, this was an official game. They played 9 innings back then as well. And after 4.5 innings, they just open up the gates and let everybody in. So, that's something we did quite often, if not on a daily basis, but at least whenever we had time from school, that's the place we would be. So kind of just reminisce with you for a minute or two, because once again, like I said, spring is in the air. Grass is being cut all over the place. You can smell it. It's that time of year. Baseball is king once again, and that's the whole story as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, we're going to talk about a lot of different things today, but of course, primarily we're going to be talking about baseball. We've got 3 games that we're going to take a close look at, give you an idea as to what the line movement is on those games, as well as in which direction the pros are going. And we're going to talk about contrarian betting against the public. People always ask me, they'll say, what is a contrarian? What is it? What's the difference between a contrarian and the other people that bet? And there's a big difference. And we'll go into that as well, kind of give you some of the philosophy or the idea of what contrarian betting is like. Over here at the Sports Wagering Zone, we are primarily contrarians. Doesn't mean we don't bet on a favorite every now and then, because every now and then a favorite is really the value one to pick in that particular situation. So we do that as well. But primarily, we're here talking about betting against the public, being contrarian bettors, which generally means betting for the underdog. So we're going into that. And like I said, we have 3 games on tap we're going to take a look at that are going to be played today and see where the money line is going with those. You got Colorado against San Francisco, Cincinnati against Arizona, and of course the Philadelphia Phillies traveling down to Atlanta to play the Braves. So those are the 3 games we're going to talk about. Before we get to that, as usual, what we do at this time of day is take a look at what happened yesterday as far as sports betting is concerned in the major sports. The NBA is where we start off this morning. The favorites, they went 5-2 straight up. They also went 5-2 against the spread. The only upsets were by the Lakers. They were 11-point dogs against the Nets, and the Raptors were 3-point dogs against the Cavaliers. And of course, because of the 5-2 straight up and against the spread, the favorites now increased their lead to 390 to 376. That's almost 51% on the season, with 10 games closing as a pick'em as well. Meanwhile, the overs, they went 5-2. They increased their slim lead to 394 to 385, which is 50.5%. Meanwhile, the National Hockey League, the underdogs were kings. They went 6-3 straight up. Yet the Panthers and the Stars was the only game that kind of closed as a pick'em. And as whenever we say pick'em or we say somebody won by 3 or 4, that was the line. Those were Las Vegas lines. Just kind of bring that to your attention, because you might be listening and say, hey, I looked at the line on that game yesterday, and the Stars were favored, or the Panthers were favored. So we're talking about closing as a pick'em right in Vegas. Those are the numbers that we talk about. So the upsets were by the Flyers, the Jets, the Red Wings, the Blues, the Flames, and the Kings. All those underdogs came back and won. The unders went 6-4, and they lead now 209 to 296, which is just a smidgen over 51% on the season. Meanwhile, the first period overs went 6-4, but the first period unders still lead. They're at 52.5%. Meanwhile, back in Major League Baseball, the favorites and the underdogs split. So in the NBA, the favorites were the Kings yesterday. National Hockey League, the dogs were the favorites. Go to Major League Baseball, the favorites and the underdogs, they split. They were 7-7 straight up, with upsets by the Marlins, the Brewers, the Pirates, the Diamondbacks, the Rays, the Mariners, and the A's. The favorites are only ahead 62 to 55 straight up so far this season, with 3 games that closed as a pick'em as well. The overs went 10-4, but the unders still hold that slim lead, 61 to 57. So that's a roundup of what happened yesterday as far as betting is concerned. Kind of bring you up to date so that you'll kind of see how the underdogs are doing, how the favorites are doing. So it depends on which direction you want to be going. At least we give you an idea as to what happened yesterday. Now, some people do keep a record of that, and it could be very important. It may be part of the system that you may be utilizing to find out how the favorites are doing, how the underdogs are doing, and that might steer you in a certain direction. So we make that available to you. We try to keep track of it, keep it going. This way we try to help you, because all of these things that we do here, just here try to make a better handicapper out of you. We're not here to tell you who to bet on or how to bet on. Yeah, I know we kind of have this little system we've been kind of working with, trying to give you an idea as to how it's doing, because primarily for 2 reasons. Number one, the system that you're using right now may not be all that well. So perhaps you might want to integrate some of the things that we talk about into your system to make your system even better, or even more so than that. Like I said, there are 26 states right now that have legalized betting. You have 2 more states that are ready to jump in soon. They're working on legislation. It looks like the governors are going to sign them. So what that means is there are millions, literally millions of new bettors out there that are betting on a more consistent basis than they did before, where you had your casual bettor, your recreational bettor. There are some people that just bet on the March Madness. That's the only thing they'll bet on. They'll wait till that comes up, and they save their money all season long. Comes time for the big basketball tournament, and that's when they start making their bets. That's why in many instances, betting underdogs like we did this season did very, very well, betting on the tournament and betting on the underdogs, because a lot of these new bettors, most of them, favorites bettors. And when you have these people coming in betting on favorites, things of that nature, it makes the line different. It raises it. It's inflated, which is to the benefit of us guys that are contrarian. So let's take that first break. And just a reminder that within the show, we do take 3 breaks. They're all about a minute each, so just kind of gives me a chance to take a little sip of water or whatever and try to get ready, get my thoughts together for the upcoming segment. In this situation, the upcoming segment will be the 3 games that we're going to take a closer look at to see in which direction the money is flowing, which direction the line movement is going as well. So we'll be back into the zone right after this message. And welcome back. We're back in the sports wagering zone on this Sunday morning, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Chris Pardo. We're here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as most of your podcast platforms as well, such as Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, also on iHeartRadio, and others as well. So we're here. We're glad that you're listening. We totally appreciate your patronage, listening to the show. We're hearing from you most of the time. Every time we hear from you, we try to answer you back with some sort of an email just to let you know we've heard from you, kind of agree or disagree with what your comment happens to be, and we kind of take it from there. So we're getting along. Our numbers have been getting better every week. And again, that's because of you guys out there listening to the show. So let's get started with 3 games because, today is the weekend. It kind of wraps up the weekend. You have 14 Major League Baseball games. There are 10 NBA games. You have 7 hockey games. So you got a lot to kind of pick and choose from. So we're going to take a look at 3 of the Major League Baseball games on tap for today. We're going to see 3 games that are really getting some early action. As far as action goes, we're talking about in which direction the pros are going and also in which direction the line movement is going as well. So to start with, the first game we're looking at starts at 4:05 Eastern Time. The Colorado Rockies are 3-6 this season, out in San Francisco, playing the Giants, who are 5-3 so far. The Giants have taken the first 2 games in this particular series. They won 3-1, and in that game they were minus 150 favorites on the money line on Friday, and 4-3 is the score they won by yesterday. They were minus 180 favorites yesterday on the money line. But today's series is the last game in the series, and the Rockies sent out German Marquez. He has no record so far this year with a 3.6 ERA. Meanwhile, the Giants come back with Anthony DeSclafani. He has no record yet also, and he's at a 1.8 ERA so far this season. Now, looking at the line, it opened with San Francisco as a slight 115 home favorite on the minus side. Now, the pro money has come down on the red-hot Giants. They have really been on fire so far. They complete the sweep, and they're on them so that they will, and they're pushing San Francisco up to minus 120 on the money line. So we're started a little bit lower. It's been pushed up to minus 120. The Giants in this game, they have value because they're a favorite. They have a low total. The total in this game is 8, okay? And historically, the fewer amount of expected runs scored makes it even more likely that the runs come from the better team being the Giants because of their record, which is why low totals benefit the favorites. Now, some books are juicing up the under from 8 coming up to minus 115 on the money line, where it normally would be about 110. What that means, that's another possible lower scoring game. The under is 2-0 so far in this series as well, and both of the teams, they've both been profitable to the under so far this season. The Rockies are 6-3 to the under. The Giants are 6-2. Now, divisional unders so far this season are at 56%. So in this particular game, the pros are on the San Francisco Giants to sweep the 3-game series, and they're also on the under as well. Meanwhile, also around 4:10, you have the Cincinnati Reds traveling down to Arizona to play the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Reds 6-2 this season. The Diamondbacks are so far a disappointing 3-6. Now, these are two non-divisional teams. They split the first 2 games of the series. The Reds won the opener 6-5. They were minus 148 favorites, and the Diamondbacks came back with an 8-3 victory on Saturday as a plus 112 underdog. So in today's rubber match, the 3rd game, the Reds come out with Jose De Leon, who so far this season has no record, but he's had a 3.6 ERA. And the Diamondbacks, well, they give the ball to Luke Weaver. He also has no record yet because it's still early in the season, but he has an ERA of 4.76. So the line opened, the Reds listed as a short minus 120 road favorite. The public takes one look at the won and loss records of these two teams, and they're happy to back the big team, the superior team, the Reds, the Cincinnati Reds. However, despite all this, as usual, a majority of the bets are laying the chalk. We've seen Cincinnati fall from minus 120 to minus 115. Now, some shops are wrenching down to minus 110. What this means is it signals that that's a reverse line movement in progress on Arizona, going from a plus 110 down to a plus 105. The Diamondbacks have a value because they're a dog with a high total and a dog with a line movement in their favor. And those type of teams are at 55% so far this season. Now, we could also be looking at a higher scoring game here as well, because the total is 9, with the heavy overjuice being at minus 120. The over is 7-1 in the Reds games this season. The under is 5-4 in the Diamondback games so far as well. So in this particular game, the pros are on the Arizona Diamondbacks. In the first game we talked about between the Rockies and the Giants, the pros are on the San Francisco Giants. We have one more game to talk about. That's the 7 o'clock game, the Philadelphia Phillies and the Atlanta Braves. But before we get to that, let's get our second break out of the way, get that going, and when we come back, we'll be free and clear to talk about the final game that we're going to be telling you about. So it's once again, we're going to see which direction the line is going, but more importantly, once we determine which way it's going, that helps us determine as to where the pros are laying their money. So just a reminder, you're in the sports wagering zone. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, coming to you live on this fine Sunday morning from Charlotte on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. So thank you very much for listening. Right now, we're looking at 3 games on tap for today and tonight that you kind of follow, try to see which way the line is going. And once we determine which way the line is going, that helps us determine as to where the pros are laying their money. The first game we looked at were the Rockies against the Giants. And in that particular game, the pros are on the San Francisco Giants. The other game around 4 o'clock, you have the Cincinnati Reds and the Arizona Diamondbacks. In that particular game, the pros are on Arizona. Meanwhile, at 7 o'clock, you have the Philadelphia Phillies that are 5-3 this season against the Atlanta Braves that are 4-4, right at 500. This is a Sunday night baseball showdown game. You got 2 teams in the National League East. They're big rivals, and the one thing is for sure, they're trending in opposite directions. Now, this is an expression we used a lot during the playoffs and during the big March Madness situation because teams were trending in opposite directions. Now, after starting the season 4-0, the Phillies have dropped 2 straight games to the Braves, and they're now 1-3 over their last 4 games. Now, on the other side, the Braves started the season on the other way. No wins with 4 losses right to begin with. But they've won 4 straight games since they clawed back to 500. So in tonight's game, which is the series finale, by the way, the Phillies give the ball to Matt Moore. He has no record so far this season. He's 5.4 with an ERA. And the Braves, they come in with Drew Smyly. He has no record at all yet, and he's also at a 3.0 ERA. The line opened with Atlanta, listed as a big minus 150 home favorite. The pros are backing the Braves to finally complete this sweep of 3 games. It's pushed Atlanta up to minus 160 from 150 on the money line. Now, home favorites who are at 150 or more are at 63% so far this season. And teams with a line move of 10 cents or more, and especially if it's in their favor, are at 60% this season. And also, we've seen home favorites doing very well on Sunday Night Baseball, cashing in at roughly 62% over not only this season, but that number is over the past 10 years. Sunday Night Baseball game, 62%. So that's the story there. The pros in this particular series, they're on the Atlanta Braves, looking for them to come back and win all 3 games in this series. So those are the 3 games that we looked at. They're on tap. Kind of give you an idea as to where the pros are going to kind of, latch onto their coattails and just kind of give you an idea of how well or how bad that little system that we've been doing is working so far. We kind of went off to a slow start, wound up with the minus column. We were around 4-8 at one point in time, which is probably one of the worst parts, and then moved up to being 7-8 and then 8-10. And then finally, the day before yesterday, we broke through that losing streak, came up with the 11-10, 11 wins, 10 losses, which is at 52%. Meanwhile, after yesterday's games, there were 3 plays. 2 of the 3 won. The Yankees in the Tampa game, the Tampa was the team. It won. San Francisco was the team against Colorado yesterday, and they won. Lost on the Philadelphia-Atlanta game because the system had Philadelphia. So there, altogether, after 24 games, we're 13-11, and that's at 54%. Yesterday, we talked about lines and percentages, things of that nature, and you just can't judge something that happens in one day, 1 week, or 1 month. You need more data to decide whether or not this is what you would like to try to do. So Again, even though it started out on the negative side, eventually it kind of caught up to itself. Sometimes if it goes too far on the plus side, it kind of backs off a little bit, gets down to a more realistic number. Now, after a long period of time, you finally get enough data put together so that you actually fall into a percentage that is very realistic. Keeping in mind, these are the games that the pros are picking. They are normally anywhere from 56 to 60% in the way they make their selections. So right now, at this point in time, we're at 54%, and that's where we're sitting right now. So once again, just to remind you, the three games on tap for today. In the first game, around 4 o'clock, the pros have San Francisco over the Colorado Rockies. They have the Arizona Diamondbacks over the Cincinnati Reds. And in the Philadelphia Atlanta game, they're on the Atlanta Braves to sweep that series as well. So that's the story on the games for today. Right now, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to talk about contrarian betting. What is it all about? What's the psychology of it? How is it doing? What do you have to do to be a contrarian? Well, we're going to go into some of that, kind of give you an idea. Perhaps maybe you may not even know it, but you probably may fall into that category. And if not, maybe after you start listening to some of the things we have to say, might help swing you over in that direction as well. So we're going to take our final break. And just a reminder, you're in the sports wagering zone. We will be back after these messages. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, as well as on some podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many, many more. So anyway, we're talking about contrarians. What is a contrarian? What is it all about? You hear us talking about it all the time. If you're new into the business because of you're in one of those 26 states that finally legalized sports betting. Of course, one of those states is Nevada, and it's been that way for a long time. So all you new people in there from 25 states, okay, there are millions of you out there that have become casual bettors. Maybe you were a recreational bettor before, in other words, whenever you made a trip to Vegas or something of that nature, you'd put a bet in while you were there. You'd probably have some fun with it that way. Or perhaps you bet amongst your friends or relatives, or who knows, you go to see One Finger Mike down the block in the old days as well. Those days well remembered. Anyway, betting against the public, that's what we're talking about. That's what being a contrarian is. It's also known, like we said, going contrarian or betting against the public. And really, it's a long-term strategy that works pretty well for quite a few reasons. Number one, and most importantly, more often than not, the public loses. Okay? There's no doubt about it. You heard the expression, the house always wins. Casual bettors will bet based on gut instinct. They have their biases. Well, I went to that university, so I kind of support it. I bet on it. Or I like the color of the uniforms that the team's wearing. Or I live in Cincinnati, so I'm a Cincinnati fan, so I'm going to bet on Cincinnati. So those are the biases that are inherent in most casual bettors and their thought process. And they largely ignore analytics, data, the hard data that kind of goes against their way of thinking. The average bettor bets with his heart. They don't bet with their heads, and they also do certain things very usual, and they do it all the time, and you can always count on it. Just talk to your friends. Talk to them. See what they have to say. You'll get the idea. They'll focus on favorites. They love home teams. They like teams with better records because they say, if the team's got a better record, it's got to be a better team, right? And then their opponents and their teams that they like that have star players in them, that really attracts most of your casual bettors. And of course, we all know that in the business, the odds makers especially know this. And what they do, they set the lines with the public biases when they're doing it. They keep that in mind when they're doing it. So what they do is they shade the numbers toward the popular side. Now, because of that, the savvy contrarian bettors that we are, and we're brave enough to back the unpopular side, you can extract additional value by taking advantage because it's artificially inflated and the price line is not what it should be. Vegas comes out and gives you one price. Before you know it, the money starts coming in and it starts moving in one direction or another. So think of it this way. If you walk into a bar and everybody is betting on team A, you should want to be holding a ticket on team B. Now, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. There's a lot of work involved. And just figuring out where the public is and where they're going the other way is more than that. Contrarian betting, it's a solid foundation, but you also have to do your homework. You have to ensure that you're on the sharp or the pros side as well. The pros is sometimes referred to as wise guys. They're referred to as sharps. They're called sharps because in the old days, they used to sharpen their pencils. That was the whole idea of how that name came about. This means being with the professional bettors who win at a high rate. They have a track record of success. They bet huge amounts of money, and they have decades of experience. Not only that, they also have the respect to the sports books. And finally, you need to make sure you shop for the best line and the best closing number that you can get. That's all part of contrarian betting. It's just as important as anything else. But of course, being a contrarian doesn't mean you pick every underdog, okay? Certain rules you got to kind of look at. You have to pay attention to because betting on baseball is different than betting on football or basketball. Baseball is predominantly a money line sport, which means you just need to pick which team is going to win. You don't have to worry about how many runs they win by. Bettors also have a lot more games to choose from when you compare it to, say, football, that even though they're going to have one more game this season, they only have 17 games, okay? Meanwhile, in baseball, you have almost 15 games a day. You have over 2,400 games totally throughout an entire season. So if you're new to betting baseball, or you're looking for a little refresher because you kind of bounce back and forth, here's some thoughts and ideas how you can turn a profit and avoid some common mistakes that most casual bettors make. Avoid the big favorites. That's most important. The public loves taking favorites. After all, they're the better team. They're expected to win. Like we said, the books know this bias. They shade their lines toward the popular teams. For example, instead of betting a favorite at minus 300 on the money line, you could bet that team to win by 2 or more runs on the run line at 1.5. So they have to get 2 runs in order to win. And usually the vig on that is somewhere around 140. And also one thing, and you should watch very carefully, is you have to monitor the line movement. The way a line moves can tell you a lot, and a lot you need to know as to where the public is betting and where the pros are going. That's important. The goal is to bet against the public, who bet based on gut instinct. They bet on bias. And so place yourself on the side of the house, and most importantly, be on the same side as the pros are, who have the respect of the books, and they win more than they lose. Okay. Also, look out for those late moves that happen right before the first pitch. That's when the limits are the highest and the biggest moves come in around that time. Now, we've talked about limits and how they progress throughout the week, throughout the day. Okay. And we're going to talk about that in the future as well, because in the beginning of the week, they start out low. In other words, let's take the NFL into consideration to begin with. The lines come out Sunday night after that final game. The first thing that happens is when the lines first come out, the limit that you can bet is very, very low. It's just a feeler. The sports books just throw this number out that they've come up with, that they've discussed, and they say, this is where we're going with it. Let's see what happens. Let's see where the public goes with this. Let's see where the pros go with it. And then that limit changes. It increases daily up until game time, when it could change from being $1,000 as a limit back on Monday up to where it's $1 million come Sunday afternoon. So we go into more detail about that in the future, trying to bring you up to date on information like that, which would definitely be of some help to you as well. So let's take a few minutes. Let's take a look once again at the 3 games that we have on tap for today. First of all, the early games. We have the Colorado Rockies against the San Francisco Giants. In that game, the pros are on the Giants. Cincinnati Reds against the Arizona Diamondbacks. The pros are on Arizona in that particular game. And then finally, in the night game, the Philadelphia Phillies against the Atlanta Braves. In that particular game, the pros are on the Braves to win and sweep that series as well. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a very pleasant Sunday. Where I'm at, the sun is shining, the grass is growing, smells nice, spring is in the air, everything is looking, I'd say, coming up roses, as they say. So thank you very much for listening. We'll be back again tomorrow, Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We're here every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. We're here on Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m., always Eastern Time. So once again, have a very pleasant Sunday. And of course, if you're going to be betting today, I hope you have a profitable Sunday as well. So until tomorrow at 4 o'clock, I'm Chris Pardo. Thanks for listening and have a great day. Goodbye, everybody.